Facebook. Please go ahead.
Yes. Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the most awaited Students Speak session on this day, December 6th, 11 a.m. I would like to apologize for the 8-minute delay. We have handpicked students over here who have come together to voice their thoughts on multiple issues. They speak for themselves, they speak for you, and they speak for a better tomorrow. I am Revati from Craft My Career. Our motto is to craft careers and build lives. To know more about us, please visit our website, craftmycareer.co.in, or visit FB, Facebook, and know more about us and remain connected. Um, some housekeeping rules. I request all attendees to please keep their cameras and mics off at all points in time so that we are able to have a smooth session. This meeting is getting recorded and would be used for quality research and promotional purposes. So viewers are advised discretion. You please feel free to post comments on the chat window or on the Facebook page, and we'll be happy to address them later after this meeting. If time permits, we'll take questions. All right. So we have 8 very energetic students over here. Ramana, Sara, Vanshi, Ananya, Ahan, Divya, Krisha, Chinmay, all of them are very talented and come from different backgrounds. I'm going to ask Ramana to start with his introduction.
Good morning, everyone here. My name is Ramana. I am a 11th standard science integrated student studying in Fiji. It's based in Thane, Mumbai. Paradoxically, most of my interests lie towards literature and its related things. For example, I have a blog. I usually write stories and sometimes articles. Sometimes I feel crazy and write poems, which I'm not really good at. And I post them. And to be honest, the blog is not for the readers. It's more as for me, so that I can get some kind of motivation to write more. I'm also interested in anything related to space. I mean, such a huge concept. Anyways, these are my interests, and I'm Ramana. I'll be one of the panelists today. Thank you.
Ramana, can you nominate somebody, please?
Tara, why don't you move on?
Hi everyone, I'm Sara Ayachit and I'm a second year environmental engineering student. I work in an organization called Project Reach Out where we work for the welfare of special kids and also, in environmental protection. And great to see you all and I'm super excited for this session. Divya, why don't you go ahead?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Divya Krishna Kumar. I am a third year integrated MSc biotechnology student at Vellore Institute of Technology, Vellore. Is like in dancing and writing. I'm also interested in foreign languages as well. Krisha, why don't you go next?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Krisha Devanagar and I studied the 10th grade in the Samaya school. Well, I don't have any specialization as yet, so I just have my interest in hobbies. I really love to play sports and science is my passion and I'm wanting to go ahead in that field. I also really love to study literature and I love to read as well. Ananya, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I am Ananya Iyer. I'm in 10th grade in PG Garuda School. I don't have a specialization and I'm interested in writing, music, and history.
Chinmay.
Okay, a very good morning to everyone here. My name is Chinmay. I am in 10th grade and I love playing football. I currently play district football and I'd like to go ahead in that. Thank you.
Ahan.
Yeah. Hi, I am Ahan. I am currently studying in 11th grade at St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. I am interested in politics. I love to write poetry. And like most of Indians, I like to talk about cricket. So yeah, that's about me. I am Ahan and a panelist on today's session. Thank you.
Welcome all. Thank you all students for being here today. This is a very rich panel ranging from poetry, politics, physics, philosophy, literature, sports, psychology, law, and so much more, biotechnology as well. Okay, so let's start. Students, we have been in this environment where, we've been having a lot of discussions as well. So for the last 15 years, minimum, we have been studying, right? I am saying even the 10th standard children, because right from the day we are born, we start studying, teachers, parents, not teachers immediately, but parents immediately start trying to teach us how to speak and how to hold hands and, fine motor skills, soft motor skills and gross motor skills, and all of that starts getting built in. And then we reach school, and then we get exposed to so many things like education system, grading systems, teachers, schools, friends, parents. What do we think of ourselves? We learn to relate with the world. So I'm going to ask you all, what do you really think about the parents' approach? They are the first people who touch our lives in so many beautiful ways. Okay, there could be some beautiful ways and some things which pinch us. So I'd like you to share some views. Can we start with Divya?
Right. So I agree with the statement that you said that the parents play a huge role in how our character develops first and foremost.
Divya, one moment.
Like,
just sorry to disturb you. Please mute your mics when you're not speaking, please. Request this to all attendees as well. Thank you.
Yeah, as I was saying, our parents play the most important role perhaps in our development because they're there every step of the way, and they continue to guide us as we grow. And even when we're going to school and we have professionals and teachers guiding us, our parents always remain by our side. This has both good and bad associated with it. And yeah, I'd like somebody else to please continue the discussion. Chinmay, would you like to say something?
Yeah, see, I think that parents should guide us, but then we should be able to choose the subject which we want to learn. So it should be our choice for the subject and their 100% of guidance. I think that.
Now, can I speak?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So what I feel is essential is that parents should provide a very comfortable environment for students so that they can choose which path of career they want to follow so that they can choose their own future. Yes. For example, if a person is living in a very upright family where the parents say that no, you have to become a doctor, you have to become an engineer. Apna, it's a pride of a family. You have to do something for a family. And those things they tend to consider the child's perspective of the world. Right? There are so many paths, and suppose the child wants to go into humanities or something which is not very common in India. And some parents they think that this it's not really viable, and even the career paths will be very few. They won't get enough money. That's not exactly the point here, is it? The point is that the child gets their own freedom and they go into the path that they want to follow.
I'll carry it right from there. That I absolutely agree with what Chinmay, Divya, and Ramana said, that the parent should always guide us but not interfere. So there is a difference between guiding and interfering. So if the parents act as a guiding force, we can actually do wonders. And they are like the backbone for us who will actually support us.
I'll be adding on to Ahan's point right now, and I'll give you an example. So if you tell me that cooking is an essential thing because I can live my life independently because relying on outside food is unhealthy, then I would like to step into the kitchen. But if you come and tell me that it is my duty to, after a period of time, it will be my duty to cook for a fully grown adult, then I will not go enter the kitchen, right? So the way parents put up things are very important. Just like you're telling me that driving or riding is important so that I could commute here and there independently. Similarly, when my parents or if any parent tells their child that this is to make you independent, so that when you go live your life, you don't have to be dependent on outside food that is unhealthy, right? So that's where the parent approach comes in, on how they are putting up things to you, and they should be truly believing in it as well, just not for the sake of saying it, but also truly believing it.
Most of the parents, when we're children, they are the only role models that we have. They are the only people we look up to and see that this person is acting this way, and maybe that is right. Maybe we should also act that way. So when we're living in an environment where the parents themselves are not don't have the right view, they have some kind of phobia against some kind of people. For example, some people are homophobic, some people are Islamophobic. There's always some kind of thing which people have. But if the parent puts up a certain perspective for the child that yes, this is right, then their entire view of
Ramana, you muted yourself.
yeah, I'm done speaking for now.
Okay.
Can I come in here? Can I say something?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so reiterating on Divya's point, she said parents play a good role and a bad role as well. So you talk about the bad, what I've seen around me, it can be in two ways. Like some parents, like they over pamper their children, such that their children just don't learn to be independent. Like too much of spoon feeding, whereas no spoon feeding at all. Like there has to be a balance between that. So they just have to be there. They're always there. We all know our parents are always there for us. They always want us to do good. Sometimes that can turn into becoming stress or in the form of pressure. There are many new things that parents don't understand, like about mental health, I would say. So during exams, a lot of children face anxiety or nervousness. So parents are not able to understand what their children are going through. They just feel their children don't want to study, or they just making an excuse not to study. So that is where maybe they need to understand as well, and not even spoon feed their children at the same time.
I
So what?
agree.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Carry on.
No, I just wanted to. Yeah, I agree with the mental health part. A lot of people, especially in India, tend to not take mental health very seriously, and a lot of parents tend to tend to have this mindset that I'm giving my child everything. My child cannot be depressed. I am helping them out in every possible way that I can. But a lot of people don't understand that mental health does not look at affluency. Mental health does not look at grades, and it should be taken way more seriously than it is right now. Also, what I would like to add is that a lot of parents end up deciding the the careers for their kids in the sense that they want to live their lives through their kid, and they need to understand that their kid will develop into an individual of their own, and it's their job to guide them and to not shape them the way they want. Yeah, that's all I'd say.
Yeah, Divya, parents living their dreams through their children, pushing on impressions, their life impressions to their children without allowing children to bloom. Connecting their giving with being equal to their performing. If parents are giving too much, then that is getting connected to as being performing. So I would like to ask you all, what do you think that the parents can do? Now we've heard the problems. Okay, what are the positive things that parents are doing for you, or what is it that they can do according to you so that we are able to give you a better environment?
Should I
Yeah,
speak?
please, Ahan.
Yeah. So my parents never compared me with anyone, be it about marks, be it about qualities, etc. And secondly, they were supportive to me on my decision that which career I want to choose. So I chose humanities in 11th standard, which, as Ramana said, is quite unconventional even today in India. So these two things: first, trusting your child; secondly, supporting your child; and thirdly, not comparing. So these are the three things we can actually do. And when I talk about comparison, I mean that there should not be a comparison amongst friends, and there should not be a comparison between the parents' childhood and the child's childhood. कि हमारे जमाने में ऐसा हुआ करता था, because this is a difference of two eras, this is a difference of two generations, so there can't be a comparison actually.
Yeah, so saying that time and again doesn't really help, right? Because the eras are different. Fine. Who's going to take it up ahead?
Also, yeah.
Okay, Ramana, go ahead.
Thank you. Also, parents, when we are suppose and it's an exam season, okay, we're all studying really hard, and somehow we manage not to get as many marks as possible. Well, we suppose we get around somewhere in the 80s, 80%. what parents should do is they should understand that some parents should understand that these exams they don't exactly define what your child's skills, because the exams are very constricting, and they don't exactly help you bloom in showing your skills. So they should instead focus on how hard those children work and how much time they put into preparing for these exams.
So I'll add on to Ahan's point here. I have taken up environmental engineering, and that's a very unconventional field in terms of engineering, where everyone wants you to take CS, IS, or EC, maximum civil engineering. And my parents did not say no to it when they saw that I was passionate about it, right? So I think supporting your child's dream is very, very important in the right way. Okay, if you think that a career does not have prospects in this particular country, they were ready to explore other countries for me. And that gives me, every time when I think about it, I am pushed to work harder and harder in my field of education. Secondly, when we talk about supporting during my exam times, or every time when I woke up in the morning, my mom would get up along with me. And it because if you get up when you're seeing someone sleeping, you feel like, oh, even I should go and sleep, right? So she was following that exact routine with me, and that actually motivated me to do things. Obviously she was just sitting or probably reading something while I was sitting and studying, but that was a motivation to me, because I'm looking at my mom following the routine, the same routine that she preaches, right? So when she's practicing what she preaches, I would like to do that too. So that is how that support system played a very big role in my entire life.
So, Sarah, sorry, I am going to be a connecting link here. Ramana says not to define child just by exams, right? So skills go a long way. Hard work should be rewarded, not just grades. Sarah has an amazing supporting system with her parents supporting her desire to pursue an alternate career, not such a popular career. Great. Yes, Sarah. Who are you nominating next?
Ananya, why don't you talk?
One thing I really appreciate that my parents did is that they didn't really emphasize on marks until I got to the 9th grade, which really allowed me to explore stuff outside of school. And even now they know that it's very subjective, the paper, it's just that paper and though that set of questions in which I've got good marks or like not got good marks. And one more thing is that they support any option I take and give me the facts rather than their opinion on it, which lets me build up my own opinion and see how I want to go forward on my own.
Okay, facts and not opinion. Fine.
Yeah. Can I add
Can I-
something here? Yeah. So my parents, I hate studying. Okay, I do not study. I detest books. It's just we are two opposite sides. So my parents really never scolded me or said anything to me after my results came. They always encouraged me before my exams, which really led even right, instead of scolding, instead of saying negative things, they helped me study. So I think that's a factor.
Can I add just one small thing?
Yeah, please.
So we all know that 2020 has been a very, very difficult year for all of us. COVID hit us and a lot of people have died. So, well, for me, so the way my parents helped is they consistently pushed me, that they didn't shout at me for not studying. They just at some points of time just sat me down and told me this is what is going to happen if you don't study, and we should probably take it up again. We'll help you any way we can. We just want to support you, and we just want to see you fly. So this is a very good example of how parents can be supportive to the children, especially in such trying times.
I'd like to add something. In addition to success and grades, good grades being rewarded, failure is punished. And I don't think that should be the case. Failure just means that your child has gone out of their comfort zone and they have tried probably their very best to accomplish something that they haven't been too comfortable with. So I feel like parents should also take, like Ramana said, they should take their hard work into account rather than their success, because what is not always visible matters more usually.
Yes, yes. And who better to speak on this rather than a sportsman who is often seen failure? Yes, Chinmay, can you lend some
Yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. So a few years back, I was in this final game where we were winning, and so it was a tie. Sorry, and we were in the penalties round, and then I missed a penalty, and because of that my team lost. So I didn't know what to do, so I started crying. We went home through the bus. I started crying from the bus, and then I pretty much didn't eat the entire day. I was all down, like all dismotivated. I missed a penalty, I let my team down. But then my mother stepped in, she supported me, she talked to me she talked to me yes, it happens. Then it's like, it's basic. If you've taken sports, failure is must. So whatever it is, if your team loses, you lose. You are a part of a team, so you need to cope up with it and start playing again, like not playing again, but then start being strong. So yeah, then pretty much didn't go to practice for a week, but then after that I started going to practice. I made it up with my teammates, and yeah, I was up and playing again.
Great. It takes a lot of courage to say on a public forum, Chinmay, that I missed a penalty. So congratulations to you for that. Failure, overcoming failure is sometimes individual and sometimes a teamwork. And we are all a united team, right? So students, children, parents, and then the school and teachers and the society, all of us are one single team. How would you think about the educational system that is being offered to us? What are your thoughts about the grading systems?
Should I start?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so the existing system of grading I don't think is up to the mark, because it does not focus on your intelligence. It does not focus on your skills. It only focuses on that how much can you memorize from a given textbook. That's it. Also, the existing patterns, like I had read this somewhere, that students study for about 20 years and still most of them don't get a job. So I think that's enough to prove that the education system is not up to the mark, because most of it is theory based. So you just copy the question and answers. You just even during the practical classes, you just write the experiments, and the practicalism associated with is very less. And focus on grading system, like your percentage is equal to your intelligence. So while even introducing someone, we say that he has got 95%, he's very intelligent. So, which is very wrong, because your 95% is not associated with your intelligence, neither with the portion, but only with one question paper which you attempted correctly. So that's why the grading system isn't really working, and we need to find some different methods for it, diluting the existing grading system.
I'll add on to Ahan's point here. We are judged on the basis of that 3-hour paper that we write. Okay. So instead we can have options where the child is, looked as a whole, where how he's responding in the class, how he is, how he has some hidden talent. How many of us have, actually explored our hidden talents with this present education system? Not many of us. Okay. So such things should be included in the system, and that's how we should be graded. That is the thing that we should be graded on, instead of just a 3-hour paper. Because at that moment, if you don't recall that one formula, your 5 marks are gone. Not that you don't know it. Maybe you're anxious, maybe you're panicking, and you're not able to recollect that. So, if sometimes we say, oh, this child is 100 on 100 student, but he does not score 100. Because at that moment, there's something that has happened that does not, let him score that 100. So having just a 3-hour paper to evaluate our entire thing, on which your entire career is based upon, I think is not a very right or appropriate system.
If you take a look at Finland's education system, you'll find that most of these grading systems, they're not centralized. All the students have been given individual grading system depending upon what skills they have and depending upon which area they are most proficient at. India is not like that. India has a huge, a lot of students, and the student to teacher ratio is very well detrimental. So because of this, it affects students in a very bad way. For example, if you take a look at the statistics given by the Hindu paper, you'll see that every year there are at least 10,519 suicides by students in the age group of 15 to 20 every year. This is about 28 suicides on a daily basis. And this isn't just because of the societal pressure or some other factor. This is mostly because of how difficult our education system has made it for children to actually explore their skill set.
Yes, I agree. The fact that studying and exams are so stressful, especially to children who are still studying and are very young. Even when you're in college, you're very young. You're less than 25 years old. And at this point in your life, I don't think you should be experiencing stress to the point where you contemplate taking your own life. So if there is a way to dilute the grading system and to improve the education system, I feel like this perspective needs to be looked at, definitely. Also, there's another thing that I'd like to touch upon, the education system. This is a very trivial point, rather, but it is important in the sense that even this has not been improved yet. So the syllabus of different boards, I think everybody would agree here that it hasn't been updated as often as it should be. So when I was in 10th grade, I was still studying syllabus that was last updated in 2003. I was in 10th grade in 2015-16, that academic year. I feel like I should not, a lot has changed in those 12 years that existed between 2003 and 2015-16. And I feel like that should be updated more often, because once you come to college and once you get a job, you eventually will have to unlearn everything, because everything is just so outdated and it doesn't work in the real life anymore.
I'd like to add on something here. So the subject I detest the most is really social studies. So my teacher used to teach me social studies. She was like, this portion is so outdated, and she used to tell me what I was learning in 10th grade is exactly what you were learning. And that really got me thinking, because like what she was learning, the era was completely like, she's Gen X and we Gen Z. So look at the difference. It's like huge. And what all the updated, all the changes they're bringing in the textbook is just in the numbers. Like they're just changing the data that we had earlier, but the main content still remains the same. And I really can't see where I can apply it today. Just the application's missing. So that is what I would really want the education system to include in it.
I'll add like one small point here. So imagine you get 97%. And with this percentage, you apply to an esteemed university like the Delhi University for a chemistry major. But guess what? The cutoff is 99%. So how does the child feel at that point of time? He has put in all his hard work. He's been, working for this day. He's been looking forward to join this university. But the cutoffs have suddenly changed because the year 2020 had most number of 99 or 100% in the CBSE. So how at that point of time, any child would feel so dejected and disappointed, right? And now parents can't say that you haven't scored or you haven't got your grades. You have your scores, but looks at the cutoff was extremely high. So I don't know how it is justified to have such high cutoffs at times.
Sarah, adding to your point, I would like Divya to talk about this. Divya, how would you feel? How did you feel? I would like you to really say what really happens when you worked hard through an entrance and you don't get through it because of a cutoff.
Yes. So, I gave 4 entrance exams and I did not get through for any of them. It was partially because of the fact that my first entrance exam did not go very well, and then I just gave up after that. But that first entrance exam, I feel like I wrote the best. And I really, even after doing my best, it just wasn't enough. The fact that in Mumbai itself, for that entrance exam, for NEET, let me just say this. For NEET, the cutoff for the very best colleges was 600 out of 720. It's just too high, first of all. And I don't feel like this encourages students to give entrance exams, because a lot of us, we just, again, like Ahan said, it depends on that day, that very question paper. It's different sets and it's different difficulty levels. So I just don't feel like if there is an entrance exam, it should be uniform throughout.
With reservations?
Right, that also plays a huge role. So this 600 out of 720 cutoff was for general quota. And I remember for reserved categories, it was 190 or something. It was that was the gap. And it just shows that sometimes merit does not get the credit that it deserves in these cases.
I'll just add on to that. This is a bit controversial topic, but if the gap between the cutoff for general category and the reserved category is so vast, then we need to think that if a child who has some particular quota gets into a college with, very less marks, is it possible for him to survive the rat race which goes on within the college? Because within the college, you will not have a reservation. So if the difference is a bit less, like 600 and 550, that's a difference of 50 marks, but that's still considerable. If the difference is so much, like 90-95% compared to 50-55%. So that's a vast gap. So we need to introduce merit within reservations. So that
results, that results in two things. One, merit not being rewarded. Second, dropouts happening after having got an admission through colleges. So we are losing out on both the sides. People who are deserving meritoriously, they are not able to pursue their choice of careers. People who have gotten because of quotas, they are not able to perform because of the rigor of the course. And therefore, they are still losing out on their careers, right? So it's a lose-lose situation, and maybe something needs to be done about that.
This actually contributes to brain drain, if I'm not wrong, because those in the general category, if they are economically stable, they'll rather prefer to study abroad where there isn't really this quota system really prevalent, because they'll perhaps get an admission there if they have good academic credentials.
Yeah, well, we'll address the deprived children or the children who don't have access to money in the evening session, which is going to be a debate. Yeah. What do you think about the teachers and the school approach?
Can I start?
Yeah.
So one thing I think we'd all agree with is that there are a lot of teachers, not all of them, but a lot of teachers who tend to be biased towards a certain few students. This can be on the basis of marks. This can be on the basis of connections, stuff like that. And in the same vein, I'd like to say that these people are negatively biased against those who don't get marks and those who talk in class, those who disrupt class. I understand that it is a source of irritation, but I don't feel like it should translate into a bias against those students. And the students that are in between are, like Ananya said in one of our previous discussions that we were having, are ignored. And it just should not be this way. I feel like this bias that the teachers have created in the classroom creates a hostile environment for the development of the students. And it should plainly state it should just not be there.
We all know that a lot of us teachers are not exactly qualified teachers. The Section 23 of the Right to Education Act of 2009, the RTE Act, mandates that all government school teachers should possess minimum qualification laid down by the National Council of Teacher Education. Now, this was passed in 2009, and teachers were given 5-6 years until March 31st, 2015 to get qualified. Out of 1.1 million teachers out of 6.6 million were still unqualified, and as of 2018, 17% for primary and 15% for middle school teachers were again unqualified.
So I'll add on to Ramana's point. Sometimes they have qualification, but not the right behavior. They don't know how they should be behaving with a child who is sensitive, or the child who may have some kind of issues going at home, or whatever it is, right? So it's not about a child who's having issues. It's generally behaving like a human is important, right? And that's what education is about. You're showing us that you're educated by behaving well with us, right? So also one thing that I would like to add on is when they're trained as teachers, I don't know if they are trained to behave well with the students. I don't know if they understand that their behavior plays a big role in a student's life. So a student who is super sincere and who is looking up to their teacher like a second parent may get demotivated, may feel bad about the behavior that they have portrayed in the class by yelling, shouting, or giving unreasonable punishments. Of course, things have changed from, things like hitting do not happen, but even then, these small behaviors play a big role in a student's life. Secondly, there are a lot of disabilities like learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, ADHD, which are supposed to be diagnosed at a very early age. But if a teacher does not understand the difference between a lazy student and a student who may have this disability, then it can be a disaster. Because maybe in the PTMs, they're complaining about how this child does not write, how this child does not understand anything that is told in the class, and maybe the parents are adding pressure on the child, and this can go really bad. Most of the times, these disabilities are figured out in their 9th or 10th grade after the child has failed. And we cannot really blame anyone at this point of time, but if our teacher training programs have these topics touched upon, such cases can be avoided.
Okay, can I talk? Yeah. So when I was in ninth, I was a guy who made the class clown, you said. So I used to make everyone laugh, and I used to pass comments, So my teacher hung up on that thought that yes, I am mischievous. Okay, I was mischievous in ninth, but then what they do is they still hang on to that thought. If he's in 10th now, he will still be mischievous. So what they do is what they did in ninth: punishment, punishment, punishment. They do the same in 10th. So they don't see any difference. Yes.
Yeah.
Also, in the way they give punishment, sometimes Sarah said that some these days teachers don't give us physical punishment like slapping around. I disagree because I have seen physical punishment being given, and I've also been given physical punishment myself. I've been slapped here and there sometimes, and for very trivial things as well. Because these teachers, they have to understand that physical punishment doesn't exactly help your student become better at what they're doing. It only motivates them to be fearful of you and to walk carefully around you. So these things, and even humiliative tactics like making the students stand in front of the class and shouting at them for not getting the homework done, throwing your book around just because you didn't do it completely or your handwriting was not up to the mark. So these things are not exactly helping your students become better.
I would
Continuing
like to
from
add,
there,
yeah, go ahead.
thank you. Continuing from there, talking about punishments, this is a factor that is rarely addressed. That be it punishments, be it humiliating the students, there is always a gender bias that exists. So now this is my point of view, which might be wrong, but boys are scolded and punished more as compared to the girls for the same wrongdoing. Now, if I'm wrong, please do correct me, but this is what I feel.
So I feel that the gender bias exists because of the pre-existing stereotypes that boys are always notorious and they tend to be more, I don't know, loud and violent, and girls are quiet and they are straightforward or down to earth. So that is what really leads to the gender bias. And moving on here, uh, what we learn, what is absorbed into our subconscious, knowingly, unknowingly, we have to spend years trying to unlearn all of that. So I think that speaks volumes about our education system. Even in the small things, it's all, it's basically instilling patriarchy in those 10 or 15 years of education.
Adding on to Ahan's point there, that boys, there are certain gender standards that students are held to. Like boys are generally considered mischievous and disruptive, and girls are considered quiet and down to earth. This works in both ways. If a female student and a male student both like disrupt the class in some way, in what I've seen is that the male student is allowed to get away with it on the premise that boys will be boys. But the female student is reprimanded because you are supposed to be quiet, you are not supposed to be loud, like you are disrupting the class and you're like basically stepping out of the box that society has created for you. So yeah, it does work in both ways. I'm not disagreeing with what Ahan said, but I'm just adding on to it.
Yeah, agreeing to Divya and Ahan's point, I would like to add on. So, sometimes the teachers, they have only a son, or that does not mean that you relate to only boys in the class, right? The class has girls and boys as well. So if a girl is shy or if she is a little quiet, then the teacher goes on like, oh, girls will be girls. They can never talk. They can never stand up. Maybe the child is introvert. It's not about girls or boys here. And it also comes down to career choices. There were 6 class in the 12th grade. There were 6 students in the CS class. Okay, and the 6 girls. That's what I'm saying. Out of 21. And my teachers had this thought process that girls cannot code, girls cannot really, understand computer sciences, and they're not great at mathematics or physics. All they can do is biology. So such biases when it comes to your career choices is not appropriate.
Yeah. So teacher training programs not to carry perceptions, understand what is effective punishment from students' perspective. Let me tell you, you all are up for a debate with the teachers in the evening. Yeah. So prepare yourselves well. We are happy to hear you all. Okay, so there was a thought of new age concepts and modern age concepts. So we briefly touched upon parents telling us not to do, or rather parents living their life and their career choices through our children. Okay, but what is really missing here? They are wanting us to follow the traditional concepts, wherein there are many more new age concepts that have really come in. Right, like in the 1990s, the internet was written off. Now, who lives without internet? Yeah. So, what are your thoughts? What do you think about the adaptability of new age modern concepts, the online addiction, the possibility of us getting distracted by either Netflix or games or so many other things? And then, even please do touch upon education as well, because we would like to understand what is the new age modern education concept in your thought, because you said that grading systems should be diluted. We want some change over there. Yeah, so let's address all these issues one by one in the modern approach versus the traditional approach. I would like Ahan to start with this.
Yeah, so 2020 has actually changed the arguments about online addiction to online education, because we don't really have a choice right now because everything is online. So like we don't have
teachers
option.
used to say earlier ki phone school mein leke mat aao, we will take it, confiscate. Now the schools are saying everybody should have a phone. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so this is how everything is changing, and I think this is just a trailer, and picture to abhi baki hai, because even work from home has actually become a concept now, and some major companies have actually written off physical offices till June 2021, if I'm not wrong, because work from home is seeming feasible for some. So this online methods or the new age methods are actually helping. And yeah, that's it.
Also, adding on to Ahan's point, I would like to point out that a university somewhere in USA has now made it permanent. Online learning has been made permanent. In person classes will only be limited to laboratories and practical experiments of those kinds. Also, talking about addictions and all, let's take a step back and look at it from a broader perspective. Social media is not just a black hole which sucks students and others into a spiral. Social media is also beneficial in a lot of ways. For example, I am using social media to advertise my blog. I'm using social media to let off some stress or was anything of that kind which I've been collecting due to my studies or any other factor. Social media helps in its own ways, but it can also be very detrimental if you use it in the wrong way. So in the end, it depends on how the person is. And to be honest, parents also play a very important role here by being some kind of a moderator to stand as a barrier between you and the negative side of social media.
Right. I'd like to add on to that. The thing is, most of the times the case is that while people like to say that social media is a distraction, students get distracted from their studies by social media. The thing is that you remember how we discussed about how the education system and the grading system makes everything so stressful. It makes it so stressful that the children start associating negative emotions and thoughts with studies, and they use social media as a distraction from those negative emotions rather than studies. I feel like if this whole system was made a little less stressful, these negative emotions wouldn't be associated with it, and we'd have a healthy balance of studies as well as entertainment.
Yeah, I think I'll add on to that. I strongly feel that the education system should be, integrated with today's technology. Yeah, I'm not saying that you should be allowing phones in the school, but at least we could do minimal things like having visual representation of the structure of an atom rather than just drawing it on the board. So that way we're embracing technology in our lives, and children should be addressed in their schools about how things work and how there are negative impacts. Sometimes we don't know what is true or what is fake. Of course, that comes over period of time. But if our teachers could take out some time and address things or touch upon things like these, then it could avoid a lot of things. If they address addiction, it would be great.
I'll just add on to that. I agree with Sarah that we actually need to adapt, new methods. Like, what's the point in writing, 20 pages of a particular project, which is not going to help me anyway in the future? Instead, I can easily represent it via a PowerPoint with visual representation as well. So perhaps this system should be easier for students, because I think a student will enjoy making a PowerPoint compared to just writing down the information from Wikipedia copy paste. Maybe the PowerPoint presentation, you can just ask the students to do an analysis there. So students will also enjoy it, and it is actual learning and not just copy paste as the education system suggests right now.
Also, adding,
Yeah,
I'll just say a small thing, okay. Adding on to Ahan's point, making PowerPoint presentations and presenting them to the class also enhances your presentation skills as well as public speaking skills. If not that, then we should also take into consideration how handmade projects don't really contribute much other than researching abilities and all. Also, when you go forward and start a career, PowerPoint presentations are usually much more important than handmade presentations themselves.
So PowerPoint presentations, we have a lot of those in our school, but I've also noticed that most children still do the same. They copy paste from Wikipedia. So it's also about how you give the project, what kind of assignment you give them. It should be an analysis and not just again like you write, but instead you type here. So it should not be like that. It should be something of a different perspective. You should try to see how the child can develop on their public speaking skills, their analysis skills. Now they can understand more of what they're learning, not just memorize it, but understand it.
I feel like plagiarism checks help with this in the sense that, if you're forced to write something like that after understanding it, you can ensure that by, plagiarism checks will help you, help teachers make students understand that just copying and pasting stuff from Wikipedia, from anywhere else really, it doesn't really help with understanding the subject. When you're forced to write it down in your own words, that helps more, while also preserving the quality of the originally.
I'd like to say something about how we're using technology in online school. Right now, every teacher is using their PowerPoint presentations and Word documents to show us what they haven't really been able to use the internet productively for us. Because the other day I was in school and we were doing a chapter which I don't really have much interest in, and the teacher suddenly she brought forward the idea of using this quiz website, and that really, it was fun. I had fun learning it, and it was so interactive, and like, it was fun. So I think that would be a really productive thing for all teachers to do, especially in subjects that can get dry really easily.
Okay, so Ahan started with online education as being the in thing. Ramana saying some universities taking online education, making it permanent. But I have been hearing a lot about students not attending online school. Okay, so is it the online medium or is it the teaching mechanism? Think about it. Um, the negative emotions associated with studies. Divya, you said that. That is, I think, very well connected. I think there is also, in this COVID era, the inability to, find a way to express your energy. You all are all confined and your hormonal levels are like, dancing around. So you all need that way to let it be, and maybe that is one way of connecting with this external environment, either through Netflix or through games, and living that world where you're meeting so many personalities. But that's my perception. Again, we will be having parents debating with you on this evening. Okay. um, Visual representation, new methods. Of course, somebody mentioned visual representation is required, and instead of making a project, get us to make a presentation and all. My only point to this would be that not every student would want to make a PowerPoint. I think one or two people also said that, because they just might be very good at literature, they might just be very good in language, and they might just have a flair to write. They could just write 10 pages and they just don't care about how to market it. So that's fine. So maybe whether you think that a choice of how to do projects should be given to children, um, 10 projects or 2 projects, 10 projects with Wikipedia and copy paste, or 2 projects which are going to be more meaningful. Okay, so let's go ahead with this.
I'll start, ma'am.
Yes.
So when teachers are giving projects, I think a teacher should know the capacity of the students and what they can do. So if I don't like to write, so she needs to give me a role, or she can give me a role that includes more of speaking or more of per se acting or something. So they need to understand the capacity of us, and then they need to give us the role based on that.
Okay.
Also, the projects they give us, even depending on whatever it is, PowerPoint or handwritten, depending on the student, they should be a very analytic in nature. For example, if the project is something like give me the brief history of Shakespeare's achievements and his life, no, that is something which can be copied off and copy pasted very easily. Now, if you ask me something like give a very in-depth analysis of Shakespeare's works and unabridged and abridged version themselves, so that would encourage the student to actually engage in in their project and understand what's actually going on. So in a way, it's also educational and helps the students become better.
So I'll add on to that. Science projects can be actually practical. Things like electrolysis can be done taking 2 buckets, actually 2 small buckets, and you can actually set up that electrolysis setup and understand it much better. So if you look at history projects, they're usually write about this historical thing, situation or incident that happened and stuff like that. But probably if you ask them to pen down what are the things that you have learned from this and how we could not repeat it, that would make more sense, because that's what history is about, that we shouldn't be repeating things, or maybe we should be taking out the positive impacts from that incident, right? So these projects would be engaging and it would be fun as well.
I agree. Like, if anybody remembers, there was this TV program when we were young called Backyard Science, and they used to show all these science experiments and explain concepts of science based on things that are available in our own homes. And I feel like if it's that easy, then it should be employed. I completely agree with Sarah's point here. If it's that easy, then I feel like it should be inculcated in our education system.
I think another good method to do this are multidisciplinary projects. So we have a common topic, and we have the same topic for all the subjects. We work in a group, and so we have the same topic. So we need to research less, but we need to analyze more for every particular subject. So I think that's a bit beneficial, and yeah, it also gives the students the autonomy to divide the work amongst themselves. So I am interested in language and social science. So my group will give me more work in these subjects and will not give me more work for mathematics and science. Similarly works for other students. So I think that's a good method.
Very good suggestion, Ahan. Also, maybe if the project is with respect to plants, then maybe someone who loves nature can contribute from the perspective of nature. Somebody who loves it from their growth from biology, they can contribute from the perspective of biology. The importance of plants in the environment, beauty, so many things. So maybe the approach towards projects can be better. More often than not, we parents end up doing the projects for children, at least until 7th standard. I don't even see why I do those projects personally, but of course, that's my personal view. Okay, moving on towards the social connect. Yeah. Like we've seen that, sometimes children tend to have a certain kind of a liking to the opposite sex person. Okay, a male will like a female, maybe just to talk, okay, maybe just for friendship, or maybe more than friendship. All right. Sometimes we see that there's a huge reaction to rapes when we read about them in the papers. Sometimes we see students are not at all connected with the environment. Yeah, they are not really bothered as to what is happening. We want to raise awareness about everything, but hello, what about oxygen? So if we don't have oxygen, we won't live. So what are we doing to this, and how is the entire system adding to the social issues that we are having? What is the student's perspective? How would you want to contribute? How would you want the system to help you contribute?
I'd like to talk about this. I would like to point out how in schools, in many schools, teachers usually have this stigma and stereotypes against males and females being together, or even sitting together is sometimes looked as a very provoking a very unnatural reaction. For example, in my school, when two students were caught uh, talking, or they were told they were caught having a relationship, and they were very berated a lot for it. Instead of doing that, they could have just looked at it in another perspective, and they could have just sat them down and talked to them that yes, this is what can happen if you engage in certain things. Other than that, there is also we never got any kind of sex education. I mean, we did have seminars about it, but to be honest, they weren't really educative, because all the males were taken to one part of the school, and the females were taken to another part of the school. We were taught about different things. For example, I never got to know about periods or anything about how a woman's cycle is, menstrual cycle is. All of this, anything I know is all because of social media or internet. And when the seminar was going on, somebody asked some stupid question. I mean, we were children. It was 8th standard. We were all laughing. We were all asking stupid questions anyways. And when some guy asked a very provocative questions, the seminar was removed. It was stopped completely and said that you guys are not mature enough to understand. And that's something which I really do not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to say that sex education is so taboo in India that even when chapters related to sex education are included in the syllabus, there are teachers who just completely refuse to teach it, which is what happened with me. There was, I think, this reproduction in humans chapter in 10th grade in CBSE. And as soon as my teacher got to that chapter, she was like, firstly, she said, okay, this is homework. Like, you study this on your own. But we asked, then we started asking her questions because we studied and we didn't understand anything. And then she was forced to teach it. And then there was this small section about protection. And, and then she just completely skipped over that part. She was just like, okay, fine. She came to that paragraph and then went to the paragraph below it. So yeah, I feel like even if we are taking small steps, there are people taking giant steps backwards, and that's not helping our case.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that's the reason that we generally talk about that one chapter. Why is it a big issue? Because we have considered it as taboo because, teachers as well as students, there is some kind of awkwardness while teaching and learning that chapter. And I think that's the sole cause of all the problems. So like Ramana said, that during that chapter or those seminars, girls and boys were taken to different rooms. So I think that's enough to understand that we are not open to sex education. And if that's the case, then I don't really think we are going to develop, because that's like the basic thing a child should understand. Like when you're 16, now in 10th standard, we are 15 or 16 years old. In couple of years, we are going to be adults. So if that's not the time when children get sex education, then what's the time? Because this taboo is going to continue, and I don't think it's going to do anything good to us.
No, agreeing to Ahan's point here, yes, if the teacher is confident when she's teaching this chapter, it would make a lot of difference. But she's usually awkward and she doesn't really want to teach the chapter. Second thing is that if we in school address the concept of dating and how we get attracted to a girl or a boy, whatever it is, then it would actually make a lot of sense, because we are immature, right? So you feel that, okay, you're attracted to this guy, or maybe the guy is attracted to this girl, and they get into relationships, which are not sensible most of the time, because you're immature and it's just friendship, and then they're like, okay, I love you. So such things, if they're addressed, then probably we could avoid, at least giving a choice to the child that, see, this is something that you might end up doing, but this is not a very right thing because you're quite young for this, right? So if we give that choice, of course, the child decides what has to be done or not. But at least our system should be giving that small, fun choice. That's it.
So,
Shara, there are ways, right? Schools do adopt certain methods to help children come around. What do you think about those methods?
I think like those methods include a counselor talking to two kids with their parents standing on top, right? So that's not helpful, because these two, they're immature and they're hiding it from their parents, they're hiding it from the teachers. They're in the constant fear that for what? Just because they are physically attracted to each other. So I don't know if any school actually goes ahead and preaches and says that, yeah, this concept of dating exists, but maybe in your young age you should not be really doing it, because the choices that you're making are not, appropriate or not right at this point of time.
So
Can I say something here? Like our school does talk about all this now, because I've actually seen this in the past few years, that they realize that this is a phase that we're going through, teenage years, where there is attraction between opposite genders. So they are actually very open talking about this. So they really need special counselors talking about this. But a lot of the times, our teachers only just talk to the children. They want to talk, so they can be very open about anything like this. And talking about sex education as well, like it was earlier, I remember maybe boys and girls used to sit apart, but then now it's all together. Even during reproduction, when chapters that's the only chapter that it's a little bit awkward when the teacher is teaching. But now I've realized that our teacher is not at all like awkward when she's teaching. It's usually the children. So when our teacher, our biology teacher, she introduces concept in the class that children, they usually smile when they think, and they exchange really weird looks when something comes up. So she's like, this chapter has been there since we were, I think, 8th grade or 7th, and from that point she's actually trained us to stop smiling like that and to be very mature about it. So when you take it in a positive perspective, you gradually become mature enough to understand that this is normal, this is natural. Otherwise you think it's something that should not be happening. That's why you hide it. You tend to hide it from people. But when you talk about it, you realize, then you gradually get over it and you understand that this is just a phase. So I think that really helps.
When you're,
can I speak?
yeah.
So I think that there needs to be some kind of support when a child says that he has a attraction to a same gender. So it happens sometimes you have attraction to the same gender. So parents should be supportive, and it takes a lot of courage to come out to others that yeah, I have a liking to the same gender. So it takes a lot of courage. So whoever you're sharing this with, the people you're sharing this with, needs to have a very support needs to be very supportive, and they should encourage you. Okay, it's okay to have a liking to the same gender.
Yeah,
Also,
so
adding on to that point, a small point, that there's a lot of homophobia and as well as transphobia in these things. We were never taught about the fact that people could be gay, or people could be pansexual, people could be demisexual, some people could be transsexual. There are a lot of ways to look at it. There are a lot of genders as well, but we were never really taught about these things. So this is something very important that could be inculcated in our curriculum as well as our extracurricular activities.
So yeah, when we're talking about gender, I think it's really important to include LGBTQ plus, because we say, right, we're not allowed to sit on the same bench as the opposite gender. But if it's the same gender, how are you so sure that I won't be attracted to her? There's a really high chance that, I don't know, the person is a member of the community. So yeah, I think that's an area where schools are really neglecting a huge part of society. And another part here is the teaching faculty never fails to, I don't know, comment when the skirts of girls are short, or when we are talking to the opposite gender, or when we are loud, or when we behave in an unstereotypical way. They never fail to comment there. So I don't understand why we are not taught about consent. Why are they so ashamed when it comes to talking about consent, or when it comes to teaching about consent in schools?
Yes, learning to
If we
say
bring up
no, it's your right.
if we bring up these social issues in school, like homophobia, Islamophobia, and the concept of consent, the crime rate will go down eventually, because that's what we learn everything in school. So it will have an effect on society, and it will be a positive change. That's what we go to school for. That's what we're educated for. So rather than focusing on more theoretical concepts that aren't really even going to help us in actual life, we could bring in more social education, which will, enrich society and spread more acceptance.
Also, the concept of rape culture is also never addressed in our schools. We never talk about rape. We never talk about how some people engage in certain activities which promote these things. For example, there was recently a scandal of boys' lockers room, an Instagram group, which was basically sexualizing women and other girls who were also minors, by the way, in an Instagram group chat, where they're basically sharing pictures and passing very lewd comments on these things. So these things are not at all addressed in our schools. These things are very important, and these things basically play a very important role in how a child's mentality is shaped and what kind of an adult they can become. Hence, education plays a very, very, very important role in determining how that person thinks and creates certain scenarios in their.
So all these things actually gradually come down to moral education and counseling. But when we talk about counseling in schools, first of all, we have a very poor counselor to student ratio in the country. And secondly, I think most of us have experienced this, that, the counseling period is generally taken away by, maths teacher or some other subjects. So that's the level of importance we give to counseling. One period or perhaps 2 periods a week, and that is also taken away to complete someone's portion, because perhaps, yes, theory is more important than moral education, perhaps, in the existing education system.
Yeah, so wow, there's so many thoughts that have just suddenly come through, and a lot of thoughts springing around, I'm sure, in your minds as well. Moral education should be a part of our syllabus, which used to be during our era, by the way. Counseling needs to be introduced in schools in more quality fashion. Even when it comes to careers, I have noticed that while we do have career counseling in school. Eventually, in the industry, when I used to hire people, I used to find that there is a complete mismatch. And that is the entire reason why I think career counseling needs to be approached very differently. It's not about a career name that gets adopted. It's not about I am sad, I am happy. It's not the nomenclature that you attach to your personality just in itself, but it is the path, it is the life, it is the texture that you add to your life, and so much more. And each of these facets is only going to add to the quality of your life. Um,
You're on mute, ma'am. Ma'am, you're on mute.
uh, what's the takeaway from here? All right. So, of course, we are going to meet again in the evening. And let me assure you, the kind of discussion we had now, it was a very happy-go-lucky discussion, because I really haven't contested anything over here. We said, okay, grading systems have to be diluted. Fine. How do we do it? Okay. So, Ahan had something to say. We have not yet discussed about self approach. What are you doing to improve yourself? There is so much that is being given to you. So yeah, we'll spend 2-3 minutes on that as well. What are you doing so that you are able to optimize on the um, uh, on whatever your parents, teachers, schools, education, policy, government, counselors, all of them are doing something for you. They're contributing in some ways. But what is it that students are doing? Where is the introspection? Are we doing enough? Can we do better?
Okay. So, however arrogant this may sound, but regarding self-approach, my priority is to ignore the samaj, to ignore the society. Because if you do good, society will appreciate you for a day and forget. If you do bad, society will, criticize you for a couple of days and forget. So at the end of the day, it's you whose life is either going to be benefited or going to be negatively affected from what's happening. So talking about self-approach, I think, yeah, we generally say that we should not think about the result. We should only focus on hard work. But whenever you're working, on your back of the mind, it goes, ki, what will be the result? How will the result affect my life? So if I don't get this much percentage, will I get to my favorite college? So regarding self-approach, I try to focus on my work. I try to focus on academics, trying not to focus, about the result, which is quite difficult. So that's the first thing about my self-approach. And secondly, luckily, I have supportive parents. So I just try to ensure that whatever I do, my parents should not sink their head, with shame because of me. So that's the second thing. That's it.
I'll add on to Ahan's point. For me, it's always been setting realistic goals. I never made a timetable which said 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. I have to study, and all of that. It didn't really work. So setting up realistic goals, and again, I have supportive parents. So you don't want your parents to feel bad, or you don't want them to come to school with the principal complaining. And that has actually some or the other way pushed me to do good when it comes to my behavior or whatever. And now it's become a habit. So it's like initially I was a person who would not like to study. I was more into the extracurriculars and things like that. But then, once my mom started pushing me, and once I'm scoring the grades, I didn't want to go down. So then she didn't have to push me further, and I kept studying, and I just wanted the grades to be high. So that is the second thing.
Also, procrastination is also a very huge problem when it comes to students, especially around our age group, because in this day and age we have a lot of distractions to basically make us stray away from our path. For example, social media, Netflix. There's and for me, and for I guess a lot of other people in this panel, it's also reading and writing. So these things, they play a very important role in making you waste time. So what you need to do, as Sarah just said, is that we need to create a timetable. We need to stick to that timetable, and we need to have the willpower to actually go through with it. I made a timetable. I didn't stick to it. Hence, it affected me in a very negative way. So we should have the the strength needed to go through with it and actually understand the magnitude of a situation. Because if we don't study in in an appropriate fashion, it basically hits us, it backfires in a very, very, very.
One thing that's always pushed me to do better is the thought of how much future me would thank present me for the things that I'm doing right now. So every time I feel like I'm not, you know, I just don't want to do the things that I'm doing. I don't want to study right now. I don't want to, finish this project. Whenever I'm in that mindset, I think about how much future Divya would appreciate me for doing the stuff that I'm doing right now. And that gives me the drive to actually do something for her. So I feel like even if I'm not doing something for myself, I'm doing something for her, and I want her to be happy. That's the mindset that drives me.
Brilliant. So some takeaways, looking at your future to motivate yourself, procrastination, and how can we overcome that? Having a timetable, I would say have a life table, not a timetable. Yeah. There are so many rules that we have around us, and sometimes we think that we can solve all problems, but we cannot really solve all problems with the kind of thinking we employed when we came up with the problem in itself, right? So that's there. When we give joy to other people, then there's a happy thought that comes to us. So let's maybe give a little, be a little more kinder. Yeah, there are only three ways to make this world a better place: be kind, be kind, and be kind. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's think that maybe we can take chances, maybe we can improve our lives, and maybe we can also be more honest and contribute towards making a better society. That is also possible. Success is not final, of course, and like we discussed, failure is essential, it is not fatal. Final success is going to be a result of multiple failures. Maybe it is, however, the courage to do it, to keep doing it, to remain persistent at what we firmly believe in, that this is what we want to do, that is going to bring us eventual satisfaction, is what I would say. Yeah, so we need to develop success from failures. And all you students, all you children are our future. Like I've always said, I always say it in all my webinars also, that y'all are $1 billion portfolio. Y'all are what is going to make this society. So we want you all to keep innovating, keep thinking, remain persistent. Talent will not probably take you there, but yeah, persistence will. To press on that button and say, I can do this, and keep at it, is probably what is going to take us to our ultimate goals and objectives. So yeah, that being said, I would like you all to give me one closing statement. It has to be just one sentence. We are running short of time, or we are on time. So just one quick closing statement from each one of you.
I feel that India has a very, very bright future. It has a lot of prospects to it, and that if we play it the right way, if this generation contributes in the right way, then someday we will be one of the most brightest in the entire world.
Please nominate someone, Ramana, so we have a continuous.
Han, why don't you continue?
Thank you. What I think is that life is a journey from success to failure and to success again. And the ladder from failure to success is persistence and perseverance. So I think that's what we need to focus upon. And we also need to understand that success is subjective. And definition of everyone's success is different, and we should acknowledge that. Thank you. I nominate Chinmay.
Okay, so I think that the teachers in teaching skills and all over their skills, like overall all their skills, should take a better turn, and they should improve a little bit.
Nominate someone, Chinmay.
Sara, why don't you go?
Yeah, so I consider a person who does not litter educated, and I believe that an individual who can accept specially abled people in our society are truly educated. So if you have these skills and if you have these humanitarian values, then you are truly educated. So I would like to ask all my audiences, just question yourself and ask yourself if you are truly educated or not.
Nominate someone, Sarah.
Divya.
Right. So I think we've had a very productive discussion today. And the fact that we found so many loopholes in the education system within ourselves, within the people around us, is an indicator of the fact that we all need to improve. And while we are all, I'm sure everybody here is a great person, there's always room for improvement. I feel that once we take a few steps to achieving that, we can take a few steps in the direction of development as well.
Nominate someone, Divya.
Ananya, would you like to go next?
As the way I think my main takeaway from this is that everything can improve. Me personally, the system teaches everything. Just because some work in the past doesn't mean we have to use the same rusted metal in the future. So this really helped me personally. And I nominated Vanshi.
So I think that as long as we remain open to new ideas, as long as we stay open to change, it's all going to be all right in the future.
Krisha.
Yeah, so what I understand from the entire discussion, what I take away is that chaos is always going to be around you in the society. So just take a moment, just breathe and like self-reflect and see what you can do, and yeah, just go ahead.
Great. Do what you can do, remain persistent. There's scope for improvement for everybody, as parents, as students, as teachers, as learners, as counselors, as human beings. We need to probably just keep on improving and contributing to growth and betterment. Fantastic. On this note, we are going to end the student speak session. We will be meeting again in the evening at 5 p.m. where we'll be having 3 groups, esteemed educators, parent professionals, and empowered students. We have very eminent educators on the panel. We have really experienced people on the professional side who are going to be in the parent shoes, and we have our student body who are going to represent a gist of all the thoughts that have been presented over here in the evening. If time permits in the evening, we are also going to take question and answers. I would urge all of you to please go to Facebook and post your comments there. If you have any questions, please post those questions so we can try and address them in the session in the evening. Yeah, so thank you very much for attending. Thank you, all you students. As usual, I love you all, and we'll meet again. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank
you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for this opportunity.
Thank you.